Okay, in this problem, we are already given our predetermined overhead rate, and then we're asked in A to take 9,000 machine hours and try to determine just how much our budgeted overhead was. So we've done that here with 114,300. Now what I've done is I put in green what they've given us, and I put in red what you're calculating. And if you'll see here, we're taking actual overhead that they give us, and we're just comparing them to how much overhead was applied. And you see here that we had 9,100 machine hours times the 1270. So we applied 115,570. Now take particular notice, guys, that this is different from this amount. This amount is different from this. Why? Because we used actual machine hours here. Notice we have 9,100 versus 9,000 machine hours that were estimated, but we actually used 9,100, so we applied it by machine hour, which means that we ran more machine hours than we expected to. So when we did that, we came up with an under applied overhead of $6,080 here. Okay. Now, as this cost is transferred, as I mentioned in the first video, over to cost of goods sold, or it could very well be prorated to cost of goods sold or finished goods or a work in process. And I noticed that the author here actually says the overhead and overhead for the year is normally transferred to cost of goods sold. But that actually isn't true. I've actually audited about 16 manufacturing companies, and very, very clearly they prorate that overhead cost back to finished goods and work in process as well as cost of goods sold. Now, most of it is going to go in cost of goods sold because the bulk of your overhead went into those products that already went out the door, keep in mind. But I'm just kind of letting you guys know the real world is a little different from textbooks sometimes. But if we go to 1318, they've given us this overhead applied amount. Now this is what's been applied, okay? And so we can calculate the direct labor hours by dividing that predetermined rate into it that they give us. So we got 9240 in direct labor hours. Now notice here in this problem, we have both of these that are green. The reason they are is because both of them are given to us. They gave us the actual, and they also gave us the applied. And all we're doing is taking the difference of the two. And we get kind of a 4,200 of over applied. And that means that actual was simply just less than overhead that was applied. Okay? So that means we basically ran less cost for overhead than we expected to. Right? Now, C asks us, well, why the difference? Remember that when we determined this overhead applied amount up here, and we kind of came up with this $12, it was an estimate. It's just an estimate. And so if your actual costs are less, right, then you're going to have an over applied amount. Now, if you work more hours, though, because you're basing it on your direct labor hours than you expected to, then you're also maybe have some over applied amount. Okay, so it could be from either one. Now, I want you to realize that at the end of the month, if we're talking about just a month, then very often we just leave the under applied and over applied amount in those accounts. And usually at the end of the year, or maybe at the end of the quarter, depending on the size of your company, you would go ahead and then transfer that to cost of goods sold. So in D, that's all that's about. Okay? So don't be too overthink that too much. Okay? But anyway, these are just some simple little problems, guys, that show you what this under and over applied thing is. And remember, this is strictly just dealing directly with overhead costs.